And welcome today to my interview for the Victorious Souls podcast. Today on my interview, I have a gentleman named Mark Resnick. This is a man who found the blessings and the mindset that transformed his life at the age of 50 in the midst of tragedy and darkness. That's a time when we generally get messed up, but he had his life open up into just some really wonderful things because of what he learned through this. And he's an author now. He is going to be sharing with us his book, 10 Days with Dad. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Danielle Bernack from daniellebernack.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. So welcome with me today, my guest, Mark Resnick. Hello, Mark. Thank you for being on the show with me today and sharing your story about how you found this transformation in the midst of tragedy and darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Danielle. Very great to be live, by the way. So exciting.
Oh, yes, I love doing it live. And for those of you who are new to me, I do it all live because I want you to get the real deal. I want you to get the genuine. It's just us. You get the mistakes. You get when we forget something, when we say it wrong, we screw up, you get the warts and all because you get real. So Mark, before all this transformation occurred at the age of 50, who was Mark before that? How did you grow up? Who were you before all of that time?
Yeah, I grew up as a middle child. I have an older and a younger brother. And my story is a little bit unique in the sense that my parents divorced when I was young. Nothing unique about that. But when I was 7, my mom moved out of the house, not my dad, which was very unusual in 1980.
Yeah.
So that was interesting growing up in a household of boys, and my dad, as far as I know, didn't know how to cook or do the laundry when he was forced into this role. And it definitely had sort of lifelong consequences, both good and bad. My dad was so busy raising us, taking us to hockey and soccer and Boy Scouts and cooking and cleaning and doing laundry, blah 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 blah, that he was toast. By the end of the day, he was toast. And it wasn't my dad wasn't a warm and fuzzy kind of guy. He was very loving, but he wasn't able to show that kind of love to us. So in a lot of ways, my brothers and I, we grew up kind of alone, and we had to figure out a lot of things on our own by ourselves, whether it was applying to college, I mean, certainly relationships, schoolwork. You know, he was too busy to be checking on our homework. He just assumed we were doing it. So I mean, honestly, the Mark Resnick my whole life has been that sort of classic middle child. I'm always trying to keep the peace. Right? I'm always giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, and just general kind of, just giving. I didn't know anything better than just to give as much as I could, and so which is good and bad, which we can talk about.
Yeah.
But I think when you grow up without a mom, and probably the same if you grow up without a dad, but especially without a mom, without that maternal connection, that in my opinion anyhow, I know it's true for my brothers and I, that you kind of it kind of takes a hit on your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth. You don't know it at the time. As you're growing up, you have no idea.
Right.
But as you get older, you kind of realize that, geez, yeah, there's definitely some consequences, like just believing yourself when nobody's reinforcing, saying, hey, good job, Mark. You tend to doubt yourself a lot. So I think for most of my life, I was probably one of those people, not probably, definitely, I never really felt like I was successful in anything, even though I had a lot of success. I just never really felt it. I was always kind of like, imposter syndrome, just doubting myself, just kind of comparing myself to others, always kind of looking back and regretting things and kind of holding some grudges and stuff. So that was the old Mark for most of my life. And you would know it. Nobody would know it except for myself. I didn't outwardly, I was very optimistic and positive, but I think I beat myself up quite a bit growing up.
Yeah, well, there's a reason we are supposed to have two parents. Growing up with a single parent in any way for any reason is hard, and it leaves marks behind. It
Yeah.
depends on how much the parent who is there doing it, how the tools they have, the support system they have or don't have, the tools they don't have, that really affects how much trauma would be mitigated or augmented.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I grew up with a single parent when I was 14 and older, and we had no support system, no tools and all of that. So I feel you, but I also knew someone who raised her kids, and she worked very hard at bringing a male figure into her kids' lives. And, you know, and no, there's no perfect thing. Even when you have both parents, then there's those problems. So there's no perfect anything except for God. One thing's perfect. That's it. But
Exactly.
that's yeah, that's hard. And getting home at the end of the day, he had nothing left, and sounds like he didn't have tools really when he had his own tank full. And then he probably had his own trauma. You know, his wife left him, you know, like this. So those are some things I'm starting to unpack with my life is, wow, my parents had feelings and thoughts and situation they were going through too. But when you're a kid, you don't think about that. You can't. It's just not, it's not a thing. It's just not a thing.
You
But as
nailed
an
it on
adult,
the
when
head.
you go to help other people, you're like, oh, wow, the parents, they had things.
Yeah, I mean that's so true. He just didn't have the tools, honestly. He just didn't
Yeah.
have the tools to be empathetic and compassionate and, you know, express love that way you'd want to be loved and
Yeah. And see,
appreciated.
there's no
Recognized.
condemnation we have for him for that.
Yeah,
But that
none.
doesn't mean you don't deal with how that affected you. There's a lot of people, they won't
Yeah,
deal with how it affected them because they don't want to turn their parent into this bad thing. Well, just
yeah.
they didn't have the tools. You don't have to turn them into a bad thing. They just, you know, didn't have what you needed, right?
In my case, that's 100% true. I mean,
Yeah.
I always loved my dad. We always had a great relationship. It just wasn't the relationship that I give to my kids, you know, but again, I
Yeah.
didn't know any better at the time.
Right. It was just your normal.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
your dad got sick. How did that happen? Because he was sick for a long time
Well,
before things got critical. So,
yeah. So the interesting, what I find interesting anyhow is that my dad and I were started a business together.
oh, really?
We worked together for 14 years. And during that time, we actually brought in my older and younger brother. All of us were in the business together,
Oh,
which
wow.
was
What kind of
crazy.
business was that?
It's our like a sales, it's a promotional products business. So we sell branded merchandise,
Oh, wow. That's
printed
cool.
products and things like that. So I never in a million years thought I'd ever work with my dad, never mind my two brothers. And here we are. The guys, the guys from Beers Ave ended up being in business together. It was crazy. So we were very close. I worked with him for 14 years. He coached me many years in hockey. Um, Obviously I lived with him for 22 years. But you know what? Until he got sick in 2014, honestly, I never really felt like I knew who my dad was.
Hmm.
I never knew his story.
Hmm.
You know, I knew he grew up with his mom raised him. His dad actually was out of the picture very early.
Wow.
Um, but I never knew the details, and I never
Yeah.
bothered to, you know, really find out even why my mom was the one who moved out instead of my dad. There was a lot of questions that I didn't know about and didn't really think too much about him until he got sick.
Hmm.
And then once he got sick, right, it's like that, the clock is on. It's a terminal disease. I mean, we're all terminal, but it was a terminal disease and we knew there was a timeline. And it was 2014. And the first couple of years of his Alzheimer's, he was pretty good. He was pretty normal, could drive, could cook, function properly. Probably about 3 years into it is when the wheels started to fall off the bus. And, you know, he slowly would lose his independence with driving, cooking, taking his meds. So by the time 2018 rolled around, he was pretty advanced. Not to the point where he recognized us for a couple more years, but it was time for him to move into assisted living.
Hmm.
And that's really where that's really where my life really started to transform and change when he was lost his independence and I was taking care of him. The roles were reversed, right?
Yeah.
And that's where everything kind of flipped on its head.
Oh,
So
he had colon cancer too. Did he get that after he was in assisted living, or how long did he have
yeah,
that?
yes, he was diagnosed with cancer during his assisted living time. In fact, he got so sick during his in assisted living, we didn't know why. We didn't know why. We thought his Alzheimer's was really just going fast and fast, but
Hmm.
turns out he was just losing blood. And that losing his blood, he was so even more spacey and out of it than usual.
Yeah.
And when we took him to the hospital, they were like, "Wow, we need to give him a blood transfusion right now." His blood was so. The doctors and nurses were like, "I've never seen it this low. You're supposed to be at like 11 or 12 and whatever the levels they were measuring." And he was at 5, and they couldn't believe he was functioning.
Wow.
So he got lucky. He dodged a bullet that he didn't just fall on his face or break a hip or who knows what could have happened. Yeah.
Oh, so after the blood transfusion, that's when they discovered the cancer?
Yeah. They did the
Ah,
tests and it was really treatment wasn't an option. I mean, he's just too far along in his Alzheimer's. So it wouldn't have been, he wouldn't have come out of it. He would have been completely gone in terms of the anesthesia. So our choice was we really just had to let it ride. Um,
wow.
which turned out to be a blessing because
Oh, really?
yeah, because I think it limited his suffering.
Mm,
I mean, he was clear. I mean, you clearly have pain when you have Alzheimer's, but you don't have it the same way you and I do. You know, it's almost like part of your brain is numbing that pain nerves. So I think it kind of hastened his exit, which was really a blessing because there's nothing left at the end of their lives with Alzheimer's and dementia. They're just not them who they are. They're just not themselves, and
yeah.
it's so sad. It's so sad that your dog gets sick and you put him down. You put him down because you don't want to see him suffer. But our people aren't like that. We don't have that option. So it kind of worked out that I think it kind of worked out because the suffering was over for him and for us.
Wow. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Alzheimer's, because as I'd mentioned to you earlier, people hear the word and they hear superficial things, and they don't remember and things like that. And it can sound very benign.
Mhm.
It can sound very benign, but what can you share with our audience about, what a caregiver goes through, or what was your reaction when you found out he had Alzheimer's? And, what did this do to you going through this whole thing? Share with us your Alzheimer's journey, how it affected you and how it affected him. You mentioned he was
Sure.
in pain too. So what kind of pain? I'm curious about that because my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, and she had all kinds of other things on top of it too.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say this. I didn't know, I knew one person in my entire life who had dementia slash Alzheimer's. And I wasn't close to that person at all. It was a friend of a friend, friend of a family. So I
Hmm.
didn't know anything about it. And when we got the diagnosis, yeah, of course, it was a shock, right? It was just a
Hmm.
total, I knew there was no cure for it, but I didn't know or understand what I was in for.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I tell everyone, it's like when you're expecting your first child and people say, that's it, your sleep life is ruined forever. And you're like, yeah, don't worry, I can handle it. You have no idea what they're talking about when you're sleep deprived for the rest of your life. Alzheimer's is the same way. You have no idea what it's like until you go through it. Just the agony, the emotional, just watching someone you love and care about just fade away right in front of you in real time is just
Hmm.
awful. It's so sad. So to answer your question, I didn't know much about it. Of course, we did the Mr. Google came in handy and we just read as much as we could. Um, but it was all, for me personally, I was sort of like the one who was closest to my dad in terms of geography. He ended up being 10 minutes away in assisted living. So I saw him every single day for 10 months straight, sometimes twice a day, which was really amazing. And that's where I said to you earlier, I didn't know who my dad was. I literally, the hidden blessing of this was I got to know my dad really for the first time in my life when he got sick. I
Wow.
know people look at me like, huh? Like that's a weird blessing. It is because I think you can react one of two ways, right? Because there's many ways, but most people react like, oh my God, gloom and doom, what are we gonna do? I look at it like this is just an opportunity to spend as much time with my dad as possible. I didn't know how far it was going to advance, and it's different for everybody. Sometimes it's very quick, sometimes it's long. I just knew that I wanted to spend every day with my dad, at least some part of the day. And I did, and it was great. And I just got to know him so much better. But there's a gazillion questions. There's the financial questions. There's the healthcare proxy questions. There's the, do you bring somebody into your home? Do you get private care? Do you send them to assisted living? Do you send them to a nursing home? I mean, there's just so many options to consider that it's overwhelming. And for me, literally, this is what happened. We were taking care of my dad. He was living in his condo. And my brothers and I would take turns seeing him every day, just feed him, get him his medicine, take him off for breakfast. Well, after a few months of this, or 6 months, whatever, I was showing up to seeing in a March, and he was just a disaster. I showed up, I walked into the condo, and he was just completely out of it. My dad had hallucinations. So he had a hybrid Alzheimer's / Lewy body dementia. So he had hallucinations where he would see creatures or demons in the house, and they just literally overtook his life. This one day, random, no plan in place. I show up. I said, "Dad, that's it. We're out of here. Pack a bag. We're leaving." He thought we were going on vacation. He had no idea. I packed his bag. I left. I took him to my house for 10 days, which it ended up being 10 days because that's how long it took us to get him out of his home and into an assisted living residence. So I never had the typical response where it was like, it was just reaction. I literally took him out of his home, which forced us to find a place quicker right away. We found a great place and we put him there. And from then on until the day he died, it was just reaction mode for me. There wasn't a lot of thinking. It was just like, okay, it was day by day. This is how I'm going to take care of my dad. This is what our plan is. This is who's going to see him when, and all that good stuff. So I think the number one thing I tell people who are just starting to go through this process is, hopefully you have a good support system in place. It's almost impossible to do it by yourself because you'll just burn out. You'll burn out and you'll get sick. So take as much help as you can get. Recruit as many family members as possible if you have that luxury, and if you don't, then yeah, it's gonna be hard. So there are various stages to Alzheimer's. There's the mild and the mid stage and the late stage, and all of them have their own symptoms. But unfortunately, you can't chart it. It's different for every single individual. As you know, everybody progresses on their own path, and I just open myself up. I just answer questions to anybody who has any kind of question about Alzheimer's. I just share my knowledge, and that's one of the things I hope to be able to do long term. Is just, this is what happened to me. This was my experience. It's going to be different for you, but ask as many questions as you can to the professionals. Yeah. So,
well, you said in there that, like, the blessing in that there came a time in his journey when you began to change. Share with us your transformation, that in the midst of this tragedy and this darkness of going through with this with your dad, then you mentioned the blessings, and then the mindset changes. Share with us your journey, how it transformed your life.
Yeah, well, my life changed as soon as I got the news from my brother about his diagnosis. That was for sure in 2014. From then on, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a permanent terminal disease. And when I tell you a switch flipped in my mind, it did. I mean, I was like, okay, our lives are short. We have to make the most of them. And from then on, I just looked for opportunities to, like, all right, what am I going to do to be happier? What am I going to do to be more balanced in my life? And as 2015 and 2016 rolled around, I just found myself more open to opportunities. I joined a life coach program, which opened up my world in a lot of different ways. It was more like, okay, you're successful in business, but what about your life? How are you building your life resume?
Life coaching is life changing. Yes. Because people don't think about that. Like, what do I need coaching in life? Well, it's like you said, you didn't know your dad till you spent that time. And they're like, how did you not know your dad? Well, it's learning the deeper things. People can live on just the surface of things, and you can do that with your own life. Like you said, you made a switch. You saw deeper. You saw deeper in life, and life coaching helps someone go deeper in life.
It did. It pushed me. It pushed my limits, and it encouraged. It kind of said to me like, how much spend more time with your family, and that it was always a priority. My family. I always had a good work-life balance, but then I started taking that to the next level, and I started to plan trips with my kids, just them one-on-one, time with my wife. More time, more special, just special time.
Yeah, more intentional.
Exactly. Be more present. I'd say that one of the biggest things though was meditation, which I was kind of always like, oh, that's kind of weird. But I was introduced to TM, transcendental meditation. I think that's how you say it. TM. I just go with TM.
That's all right. That's where we get to laugh now, where they
Yeah,
us
exactly.
tripping over ourselves.
Yeah,
It's like, what
right,
is it called
totally.
again? Some kind of meditation.
And it's been great. I mean, it took a good year for it to sort of kick in. It was more like, oh gosh, I got to meditate today, 20 minutes. It was almost a chore. But after about a year, I could really see the difference and feel the difference. My outlook and mindset was just different. I didn't get upset as easily. Things didn't bother me the same, traffic or people, or even hearing bad news was like, okay, I can freak out about it, or I can, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we're going to do. And like meditation was a big part of my transformation. And I'm not like this, like super intense. I do my 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
No, I'm good. I do my own quiet meditation. It's a different brand. It's like I learned about it, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I read an article with someone, they did just meditation, and I started with just 1 minute. And I knew someone, they were a monk for, I don't know, months and months. I'm like, I'm not doing that. But the whole thing of quieting yourself. And so I started with just 1 minute. And in this article, he shared it so graciously too, because we get so hard on ourselves. I'm supposed to be meditating, and 10 seconds in, you're thinking about, I need to go mow the lawn or something, and you need to give yourself the grace to just stop again and start over again. So I encourage people just 1 minute. I have it even written about it on my blog for people to do that. And now I do it for 3 minutes, which still isn't 20 like you, but I have a timer that I do. And if I am successful in quieting myself, I will just instinctively take a nice deep breath right before the timer goes off, because my body has adjusted to that. And some days it works better than others. And there's where the grace is like, well, if you're doing it every day, some days with everything, it's better than other days. So just give yourself the grace. It's about quieting yourself, and then you can make those intentional choices. You can hear what's going on inside your own self.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm super low key about it, but it works. And I like to do mine at night because it kind of quiets my mind before I go to bed. I don't want to be going to bed thinking of my stresses. So yeah, meditation's been great. I mean, it's been, I mean, I don't, I say to the people, like, I don't even know if my family noticed the transformation, but I could feel it right away. The last few years, I'm just I'm completely different person. I don't hold on to the grudges and the regrets, and I don't beat myself. I mean, everyone has regrets. Everyone beats themselves up, but I kind of just skip right over it now. It's just, I don't harbor those, all the people who harmed me in my life or perceived to have harmed me. I've just been able to let it go.
You let go of it being a regret. You like dealt with it. It was a regret. Sounds like it's no longer a regret because you let go. It's like it was a regret, because a regret has like a deep root. But if you're like, this thing happened, I dealt with it, and now I'm moving on. And it doesn't still affect you today. That's how you know you've let go, if it's not affecting you today.
Correct. So it was interesting. My brothers, I think we had 3 different approaches to this. I transformed myself. I'm not saying that they didn't, but I think for them, it was more like, dad's sick, dad's sick, dad's sick. It gloom and doom. He's getting worse. He's getting worse. And I was like, yeah, he is. But, I just I didn't accept it easier, but I think I used it as sort of a motivation to just get the most out of my life right now. which is one of the messages in the book, is just, hey, life is short. It's, pursue your passions right now, and don't wait until tragedy. Don't wait until
Yeah.
a diagnosis comes along to change your life.
Yeah.
We can do it right now. So yeah, I was people do look at me funny when I say that, but there were so many hidden blessings with this. Just getting to know my dad was just so wonderful.
What are some things you got to know about him that you would like to share? Just like to pique someone's interest, and maybe they would want to get to know their parent because they could find out, some cool. Can you share a cool story with us? Something that you think is cool, or something that brought understanding and closure?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did push him a little bit more on his parents, and his dad was a alcoholic and a gambler, and was basically kicked out of the house at a very young age. I didn't even know my dad. I didn't even know my grandfather's name. I didn't even know his name was William. I just either I blocked it out, or just my dad never talked about him. So he shared a couple stories about his dad, my grandfather. They weren't flattering from my grandfather's point of view, but it helped me understand who he was.
Yeah.
And just my dad took care of his mom, he took care of his sister, and it just really put into perspective why he wasn't able to, or didn't have the tools to be so emotionally engaged with us. I mean, he was a tremendous part of our lives. He was always at our games, taking us here and there, and he provided so much opportunity, private schools and hockey.
Wow.
And he did so much for us. I just couldn't appreciate that, what his struggles were. I didn't, here I am thinking my whole life, like, oh, I have all these problems. My dad had flaws and limitations and demons well beyond the dementia demons. And yet I never heard him complain or make excuses. And it just kind of all clicked at the same time. When he was getting sick, I just started to appreciate the things that I was able to learn from him without him saying a word. Just how kind he was and funny. When I got to spend time with him in the nursing home, he was just, people loved him. He was so smiling. He used to joke with me. He used to say every day, "Why are you smiling so much, Mark?" He called me Marcus. "What's so funny? Why?" And I was like, he just didn't understand that he was a smiler, that he was always smiling too. He just couldn't see it. So I just learned, I just learned more about who he was beyond my coach and my dad. I just saw that he had the compassion within him. He just didn't know how to express it. What else did I learn? I learned more about his relationships with my mom and my stepmom. I can't give you anything too specific off the top of my head, which is the beauty of live, right? But just an appreciation of all the sacrifices he made on our behalf. I just was able to appreciate it and see the full picture now.
Yeah, one thing that keeps coming to me while you're saying this, to help you who are listening, is when we're kids, we growing up, our parents are our parents.
Yeah.
That's what they are. They're a mom, they're a dad. That's their role. But they're also a husband or wife or sister or brother or son or daughter or niece or nephew. They have these other relationships, and it sounds like you did what I had the privilege of doing with my mother as well, is getting to know them as a person.
Yes.
Just a person in and of themselves, without the constraint of the role, but as the person of who they are completely on the inside. And that's a gift.
It's a gift.
That is a gift. And so that is something that you got with your dad. And I share with my audience also, I had that gift with my mom. She reached out to reconnect with me, and we rebuilt the bridge between us and got really close. And I encourage people to seek if you can do that. Some parents are unwilling to do that. Sometimes the trauma is just like, no, we're no contact. And I get that. And if you have that, my heart goes out to you. But if there's a maybe out there, dare to take the first step and see if that could happen. And sometimes when diagnosis opens the door for that, when maybe they weren't willing before, but maybe they are now. And maybe they never will be. Everyone's different. So
it's so true. And I think I wrote the book, I didn't decide to write a book. I was writing in my journal because I didn't know how to express my grief. which is what I did growing up without a parent in the house. I used to journal a ton. And so I started the journal and
That's
my dad got
amazing
sick.
that you did
Yeah.
journaling, because that's a thing they tell people to do now. And it's us growing up, that wasn't a
Yeah.
thing that they told us to do.
I I didn't have a choice growing up. I had nobody to talk to. And
Mm,
so I pulled out my notebooks and I still have them from today. And then as I'm journaling when my dad got sick, I was like, oh, there's something here. There's a story here that people can relate to and learn from and just be inspired by, I think.
yeah.
And so writing the book was it was a huge help. Um
So
again,
you wrote this book. So we didn't get into that yet. So share with our audience the name of your book. And then did you were doing your journaling. Was
yeah.
it during your journaling you decided to put it into a book, or was it after your dad passed you decided to put it into a book?
No, it was almost it was when he got really sick, probably in 2017. Not
Mm,
really sick, but when he lost his independence.
yeah.
That's when it kind of got real for me,
Yeah.
right? Like, all right, he can't drive anymore. So, okay. I only journaled less than a month and I was like, okay, there's just too many thoughts. There's too many things here. And I just said, through my life coaching program, one of the challenges that they made to us was, what's your masogi? What's your life altering bucket list thing that's outside of your comfort zone that you want to pursue? And I was like, boom, I'm going to write a book about my dad. So it started to be a book about my dad, his story, quickly transformed, morphed into my story, because it really is my story and what I was able to learn from him and his experiences and my experiences. So the book is called 10 Days with Dad.
Can you show it to us?
Yeah, of course. Let's see if I can hold this up. Now the page is torn at the top, so I don't give this book away because I have all sorts of notes in it, but it's 10 Days with Dad, finding purpose, passion, and peace during the darkest days of Alzheimer's and COVID-19. And yeah, I just really, I wanted to finish the book. It took about 2 years. I wanted to finish the book before my dad passed, but I didn't. It was a few months after he passed away, because that was my goal. But I was very motivated to write the book. And I started writing about my life, thinking about what it was like to grow up with my dad in that situation with no mom. And then what was his life like growing up without a dad? And then I kind of melded the two together, and how we had our shared experiences and how I got to know him about during his sickness. There's a whole section on the actual dementia / Alzheimer's, the caring for my experience as a caregiver, how tough it was, some of the experience, specific stories. And then the last section of the book is how I was able to actually overcome the darkness of Alzheimer's and COVID, because COVID played a big part in it as well. And sort of like, so my dad was this big hockey coach, and he had these commandments for hockey, right? These hockey commandments.
Okay.
And yeah, they were awesome. We used to recite them before every game. And some kid would say a commandment out loud. He would scream it. First man in takes the puck carrier, and then the whole team would shout back, "First man in takes the puck carrier." So it was this back and forth. There was actually like 30 commandments, and I was like, you know what? When my dad died, people were, as he was getting sick, people was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, man. I loved your dad. I love your dad." And I remember those hockey commandments from all those years ago. I'm like, if people remember these commandments from 30 years ago, I kept thinking, well, what would my kids want to remember? What would I want to tell them and share with them after I passed? And so I kind of melded his hockey commandments, led to, well, these are my life commandments. These are the 10 things that I think, I want my kids to do, like, be kind and never give up, and, expect less, and all these things. So anyways, I'm kind of rambling, but the point is, it all kind of it just kind of came together. It was one of those things where I thought, who's going to want to read about my story? But because it tied in with his story, and because it tied in with his sickness, and then, it's an inspirational message at the end. It just, I don't know. It was so helpful to deal with it all. It was awesome. It
Yeah,
was awesome.
writing is very cathartic. That's
Yeah.
how Tyler Perry wrote, because Oprah led him to writing because it was cathartic. Oprah's a big part of his story. That's in my book, Because You Matter. But it's like interesting, you were writing, it started one way and then it went another. And that's something that writing does. Pause here for our listener. If you're thinking about writing a book and you're going, who wants to read about my story? Because we've all been there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
first of all, we've all been there. And can someone learn something from your story? If they can learn something from their story and their life, from your story, and their life will be better, I encourage you to start. It might start one way and turn into something else like it did with Mark's, but start. Take a step in that direction. Let it be a part of your journey. So that sounds just wonderful, your book about the different ways to help people. And you said who would want to read about your story? People who have gone through, struggles with their parents, people who they have someone who has Alzheimer's and they've never heard of it before, like you. Did you go looking for books or something to try and help you deal with it, or maybe your brothers or something? There wasn't much out there when my mother-in-law had it that I knew of. And so I have a short story I wrote. And when I first put it out there, people were like, oh, I just needed this because there was nothing there. And as people go through it more, as we share our stories, we help one another. So thank you for being bold and sharing your story that you thought no one would want. So I think many people want your book.
I hope so. I mean, it's been the support. I mean, like I said, once you put your story out there, there's so many people like yourself that have the same story. I can't even tell you how many people have someone they know with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It's not it's now a one-to-one. It's now like your immediate family members. It's not second cousins or uncles or grandparents. It's parents. And there aren't a lot of a ton of books on here's what to do. And I didn't want this to be a here's what to do. I just simply wanted to share this is what happened to me. This is my story. But
that can be helpful for how to walk. It's an emotional journey. To walk through Alzheimer's with someone is an emotional journey. It's not just a medical journey. It's not just a parent-child journey. It's not just, that kind of thing. It's very, very emotional. The walk with someone through Alzheimer's. People present, like you said, very differently. Some people get extremely mean. Some people get really young. Some people, they hallucinate. My mother-in-law did some of that, and they present differently. And when you watch someone be someone they're not, it really impacts you in a way that you can't even explain. Like you had mentioned about someone having a kid and growing up with a single parent and stuff like that, and your sleep is going to be lost, and they think it's nothing. Well, it's like you can't say, what you can explain to someone what it's like to be a parent. You can use words, but you don't get it till you're there. And it's the same thing, I believe, with Alzheimer's too. We can help as much as we can on helping people understand and even help motivate them to support others they know, because it's a lot harder than it looks. And it's a lot more emotional than people give it credit for.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's mostly for the fact that like with a cancer or some kind of diagnosis like that, there's hope. Even if it's an advanced stage, there's hope that they can beat it. There's no hope with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or Lou Gehrig's disease. It's it. Your fate has been sealed, and you can't really grasp that until you see it unwinding in real time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they are making some headway with it to help things, which is nice. And finding causes and things can mitigate it or prevent it. They are finding more things the more they study it. So we can take hope in that when that's going out there, even like with cancer, that there are more studies out there, even though many of us think they should have had this fixed by now, but I'm not a doctor. So
Me neither.
So how can people connect with you and where can they get your book?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. Amazon is where the book is available in all the formats except for audiobook, which I'm working on. The easiest way to, it's fun. Narrating your own book is a trip. The easiest way to connect is my website, markjresnick.com. You can just do the contact form, or you can buy the book online as well at markjresnick.com. But that's probably the best way. I'm on all the socials. Facebook is a big one for me, mostly, and then Instagram. I still have the Twitter and the LinkedIn and all that stuff. But just if you want to reach out, ask me any questions. I'm happy to help, share my time. I love helping people share their story. So if you want to talk about not you and I, but if somebody wants to reach out and say, well, how did you write a book? Or what do I do? What's the first steps? I would love to help you. I want as many people as possible to share their stories.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And before we tie this up, is there any last thing you want to make sure that the people hear from you?
Yeah, definitely. For me, the biggest takeaway out of this whole experience and this whole book is what I said before. One, don't wait for tragedy. Don't wait for a life-altering event to change yourself in any way. I know we tend to pigeonhole ourselves to the person we were as a kid or as a teenager or as a young parent. Like we're under no obligation to be that person that we were 30 years ago, right?
Right.
5 years ago or 5 months ago. Don't wait. Just start small, like you said, 1 minute a day meditating, or 5 push-ups a day if you're trying to lose weight, or a 5-minute walk, or take the stairs. But I'm trying to tell my kids, I'm trying to tell young people, I'm trying to tell old people, it's never too late to change. It's never too late or too early to pursue your passions. And I think people just need to hear that. It's not going to be easy, but you only have so much time on this earth. Let's make the most of it.
Yeah, well, anything worthwhile generally takes effort.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
for us to want easy is really not realistic if we want it to have value.
Yeah.
Well,
I will say the book is very thick. It's a big book, but I have very bad eyes, so I intentionally made the font really big, and so it seems a lot bigger than it is. But hopefully you read it, you like it, write me a nice review on Amazon. I just wanted to say thank you for having me. This has been a joy talking to you.
Oh, that's wonderful. You made your book large print.
Yes.
Without it being large print. That's awesome.
Yes, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I just enjoyed this so much. Thank you for being with us here today and sharing your story with everyone.
Thanks.
And thank you for everyone listening for us today. Thank you for being here with us. Until next time, I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com, that lady on the internet who loves you. Bye-bye.